Book of Heaven, Volume 17, Part 7. January 4th, 1925. The most important act of one's life. How the whole of heaven goes to meet the soul who fuses herself in the divine will. The noble martyrdom of the soul. Having completed my whole day, I was thinking to myself, what else is left for me to do? And in my interior I heard being said to me, you have to do the most important thing, your last act of fusing yourself in the divine will. So, according to my usual way, I began to fuse all my poor being in the supreme will. And while I was doing this, it seemed to me that the heavens were opening, and I was going to meet the whole celestial court, and all of heaven was coming toward me. And my sweet Jesus told me, my daughter, fusing yourself in my will is the most solemn, the greatest, the most important act of your whole life. To fuse yourself in my will is to enter the sphere of eternity, to embrace it, to kiss it, and to receive the deposit of the goods that the eternal will contains. Even more, as the soul fuses herself in the supreme volition, all go to meet her, in order to deposit in her everything they have. The angels, the saints, the very divinity, they all deposit, knowing that they are depositing in that same will in which everything is safe. Even more, in receiving these goods, with her acts in the divine will, the soul multiplies them and gives back double glory and honor to the whole of heaven. So by fusing yourself in my will, you put heaven and earth in motion. It is a new feast for the whole empyreum. And since to fuse oneself in my will is to love and to give for all and for each one, without excluding anyone, in my goodness, so as not to let myself be surpassed in love by the creature, I place in her the goods of all, and all possible goods which I contain within me. Nor can there be lack of space in which to place all goods, because my will is immense, and lends itself to receiving everything. If you knew what you do, and what happens when you fuse yourself in my will, you would burn with the desire to fuse yourself continuously. Then afterwards I was thinking about whether I had to write what is written above or not. I did not see it as necessary, or as an important thing, more so, since obedience had not given me any command to do it. And my sweet Jesus, moving in my interior, told me, my daughter, how can it not be important to make known that fusing oneself in my will is to live in it? The soul who fuses herself in my will receives, as though in deposit, all my divine and eternal goods. The very saints compete among themselves in order to deposit their merits in the soul fused in my will, because they feel in her the glory, the power of my will, and they feel glorified in a divine manner by the littleness of the creature. Listen, my daughter, to live in my will surpasses even martyrdom in merit. Martyrdom kills the body, but living in my will is like a divine hand that kills one's will and gives one the nobility of a divine martyrdom. And every time the soul decides to live in my will, my volition prepares the blow in order to kill the human will, and forms the noble martyrdom of the soul. In fact, human will and divine will do not bond together. One has to give the place to the other, and the human will must content itself with remaining extinguished under the power of the divine will. So every time you dispose yourself to live in my volition, you dispose yourself to undergo the martyrdom of your will. See, then, what it means to fuse oneself in my will. It is to be the continuous martyr of my supreme will. And you think it is trivial or something unimportant? January 22nd, 1925. The humanity of Jesus is the new sun of souls. My life continues amid the bitternesses of the privations of my sweet Jesus. I do not know how I live. I feel a nightmare that crushes me. My very nature, in seeing itself without He who alone sustained it, would want to melt. So I feel now my bones being dislocated, now the channels of my stomach closing, in such a way that it wants to receive neither water nor foods. Poor nature of mine, without my Jesus, it wants to decline and become undone. But as it is about to become undone, a powerful strength, a strong hand clasps me, recomposes my dislocated bones, opens my channels, and prevents my total undoing. Oh God, what pain! Have pity on my hard lot. Oh, please let He who used to give me life come back to me. Or let it be that my poor nature, paying you the tribute of death, may rise up there into the bosom of my Jesus, where we shall never separate again. Now, while I was in this state of decline, but who knows after how many hardships, my sweet Jesus made himself seen in my interior, seated in the middle of it, all taciturn, with his hand on his forehead, all pensive, isolated, with no one near him. And even though he was in my interior, there was so much space within me that I was far away from him, and he was far away from me. So alone I, alone Jesus. But at any cost I wanted to go near him, speak a little word to him, keep him company in his loneliness. Then I don't know how, that space shrunk. It seemed to me that that space was the world, and Jesus was in the center of it. And Jesus seemed to be concerned about the destiny of the world that runs recklessly along to its ruin. Even more, Jesus took a point of that space and placed it upon me. I felt crushed under that weight, but I was content that my Jesus, my life, was near me. So in seeing him near me, I would have wanted to cry, so as to move him to pity for my tormenting state. I would have wanted to tell him who knows how many things. But no, I could just say to him, Jesus, do not leave me any more. Don't you see that without you, I cannot last in this exile? And he, all goodness, I do not leave you. No, no, this is a mark you want to give to your Jesus. I never leave anyone. Creatures withdraw from me, not I from them. On the contrary, I go after them. So do not want to give me this affront, that I may leave you ever again. And besides, did you not see that I was inside of you, not outside of you? And not only myself, but the whole world? Then in looking at Jesus, I could see his intelligence as more than a sun, and all the thoughts of Jesus, like many rays that came out of that sun, and extending, covered all the thoughts of creatures, past, present, and future. These rays were traveling in order to take, as though in their power, all created intelligences, and substitute for them, as perennial glory to the Father, complete reparation for everything, and impetration of all goods for all created intelligences. Then drawing me to himself, Jesus told me, "My daughter, this sun that you see within the intelligence of my humanity was formed by my divinity, that endowed me with the creative power and the all-seeingness of all things, in such a way that I was to be the new sun of souls. And just as the sun that I created for the good of nature covers the whole earth with its light, without denying the effects of its light to anyone, though it does not depart from the heavens, but unleashes from its center the rays that bring upon earth the goods that the sun contains. In the same way, without departing from me, with its inaccessible light, my divinity formed in me spokes of light, and these rays covered everyone and everything, and I, at each instant, covered each thought, word, and act of all creatures, and constituted myself perennial glory to my Father for each thought, act, word, and so forth of all human generations. While rising to the celestial Father, this light descended to take as though in its power all human acts, in order to illuminate them, warm them, and repair them. So over each human act hovers a light that wants to do good to it, continuously. In me, doing this was as though natural. You, my daughter, do not have this power to make one single act out of all acts as I did. Therefore, in my will, you shall go through each ray, one by one, and little by little, you shall follow the same path as my humanity." So I tried to go through the first ray, then through the second, and so on. But, oh power of the divine will, while going through those rays, I was so little that I seemed to have become an atom. And this atom was now in the divine intelligence, going through the intelligences of creatures, now in the Word, now in the divine motion, going through the words and motions of creatures, and so with all the rest. And the divinity, in seeing my extreme littleness within their intelligence, within their word, and within their motion, taken by love for my littleness, remained enraptured, and pleased, said, "This littleness enraptures us, and in seeing her enter our very acts, to do them together with us, to diffuse them over all, we feel such joy and such satisfaction, as we receive our own glory, that with all love we give her the freedom to enter into us, to let her operate together with us." I felt all confounded on hearing this, and I said to myself, I am doing nothing. It is the divine will that carries me in its arms. Therefore, all the glory is of his adorable will. January 27th, 1925. What Jesus does when the soul fuses herself in the divine will. The works of God remain in him, and the divine will makes itself their nourisher and preserver. And so it does for the acts of the creature done in the divine will. While I was fusing myself in the holy divine volition, I thought to myself, before, when I used to fuse myself in the holy supreme volition, Jesus was with me, and I would enter into it together with him. So entering was a reality. But now I do not see him, so I do not know whether I enter into the eternal volition or not. I feel rather as if it were a little lesson learned by heart, or a way of speaking. Now, while I was thinking of this, my lovable Jesus moved in my interior, and taking one of my hands in his, he pushed me up high and told me, "My daughter, you must know that, whether you see me or not, every time you fuse yourself in my will, from within your interior, I take your hand to push you up high, and from heaven I give you my other hand to take your other hand and pull you up into our midst, in our endless will. So you are in between my hands, in my arms. You must know that all the acts done in our will enter into the first act when we created the whole creation. And the acts of the creature, in kissing with ours, because one is the will that gives life to these acts, diffuse in all created things, just as our will is diffused everywhere. And they constitute themselves return of love, of adoration, and of continuous glory for everything we have issued in creation. Only that which is done in our will begins, almost together with us, to give us return of perennial love, adoration in a divine manner, glory that never ends. And since the love we have for all the things created by us is so great that we did not permit that they go out of our will, as we created them, they all remained with us, and our will made itself the preserver and the nourisher of all creation. And this is why all things remain always new, fresh, and beautiful, nor do they grow or decrease, as they were created all perfect by us, and therefore not subject to any kind of alteration. They all preserve their origin, because they let themselves be nourished and preserved by our will, and remain around us to sing our glory. Now the operating of the creature in our will enters into our own works, and our will makes itself the nourisher, preserver, and act of the very act of the creature. These acts done in our will by the creature place themselves around us, and transfused in all created things, sing our perpetual glory. How different is our operating from that of the creature, as well as the love with which we operate. We operate, and our love for the work we do is so great that we do not permit that it go out of ourselves, so that it may lose nothing of the beauty with which it was made. On the other hand, if the creature operates, she is unable to keep her work with herself. Rather, many times she does not know what has become of her work, whether it has become dirty or whether they have made a rag out of it, sign of her little love for her own works. And because the creature has gone out of her origin, that is, the divine will from which she came, she has lost true love toward God, toward herself, and toward her works. I wanted man to be in my will of his own will, not by force, because I loved him more than all other created things, and I wanted him to be like a king in the midst of my works. But man, ungrateful, wanted to go out of his origin. Therefore he was transformed, and lost his freshness and beauty, and became subject to continuous alterations and changes. And as much as I call him to return into his origin, he plays deaf, pretending not to hear me. But my love is so great that I keep waiting for him, and I continue to call him. February 8th, 1925. The divine will wants to reign within souls as the master of the house. This morning my sweet Jesus made himself seen in so much suffering that my poor soul felt consumed with compassion. He had all his limbs dislocated, deep wounds, and so embittered that Jesus moaned and writhed for the bitterness of the spasm. He placed himself near me, as though wanting to share his pains with me. By merely looking at him, I felt his pains being reflected in me. And Jesus, all goodness, told me, "My daughter, I can take no more. Touch my embittered wounds, so as to soothe them. Impress your kiss of love upon them, so that your love may mitigate the spasm I feel." This state of mine, so painful, is the true portrait of the way in which my will finds itself in the midst of creatures. It is present in their midst, but as though divided, because as they do their own will, not mine, mine remains dislocated and wounded by creatures. Therefore unite your will to mine, and give me a relief for my dislocation. I clasped him to myself. I kissed the wounds of his hands. Oh, how embittered they were because of many works, even holy, that do not have their origin in the will of God. In order to soothe their pain, I squeezed them in my hands, and Jesus let me do everything. Even more, he wanted it, and so I did the same with the other wounds, so much so that he remained with me for almost the whole morning. Finally, before leaving me, he told me My daughter, you have soothed me. I feel my bones in place. But do you know who can soothe me and rejoin my dislocated bones? The one who lets my will reign within herself. When the soul puts her will aside, giving it not even one act of life, my will acts as the master in the soul. It reigns, commands, and rules. It is as if it were in its own house, that is, in my celestial fatherland. So since that is my house, I act as the master. I dispose. I place from my own, because as my dwelling, I can place in it whatever I want, to make of it what I want, and I receive the greatest honor and glory that the creature can give me. On the other hand, if one wants to do her own will, she is the one who acts as the master, disposes and commands, and my will remains like a poor stranger, neglected, and at the occurrence even despised. I would want to place from my own, but I cannot, because the human will does not want to surrender a place to me. Even in holy things, it wants to act as the head, and I can place nothing from my own. How uncomfortable I feel in the soul who makes her own will reign. It happens as to a father who goes to visit a son of his who is far away, or as to a friend who goes to another friend. As he knocks, the door is opened, but he is left there in the first room. No one prepares lunch for him, or a bed on which to let him sleep. They let him share neither in their joys nor in their sorrows. What affront! What sorrow for this father or friend! If he has brought treasures to compliment the other, he does not leave anything, and he goes away, pierced in the depth of his heart. On the other hand, with someone else, as soon as they see him, they put themselves in feast. They prepare the most beautiful lunch, the softest of beds. Even more, they give him full lordship over the whole house, and also over themselves. Is this not the greatest honor, love, respect, subjection that can be offered to a father or to a friend? And what beautiful and good things shall these not leave to them, to requite so much generosity? Such is my will. It comes from heaven in order to dwell within souls. But instead of letting me be the master, they keep me like a stranger and a destitute. But my will does not depart. Even though they keep me like a stranger, I remain in their midst, waiting, in order to give them my goods, my graces, and my sanctity. You have reached the end of the Book of Heaven, Volume 17, Part 7. Fiat.